La vida es corta sin parar, mirar y de reír para celebrar. Cada momento hay que gozar, como si mañana no va a llegar.
Hola, hola. Welcome to Entre Tías y Amiguis, the podcast where we dive into the wild roller coaster ride of adulting. I'm your host, Audrey Rodriguez, a queer Salvadorian native, a first-gen trailblazer, a multipreneur and licensed psychotherapist, here to share wisdom, stories, and real talk with my tías and amiguis and other incredible guests who inspire and uplift our community. I want to remind you that while I am a licensed psychotherapist, this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The discussions we have here are not substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Now let's dive into today's conversation and explore the journey of adulting together. Grab your cafecito, get comfy, and let's get started. Welcome to Entre Tías y Amiguis, another episode where we talk about the wild roller coaster life of adulting with guests that inspire, that challenge us, but that also share parts of their heart about how they've survived this journey. And I'm really excited about this episode particularly because, as you all know, I'm like in love with being a señora. And then I met a more señora than señora that I am. And so like I'm obsessed with that conversation, with like the conversation we're going to have like in advance. Like I'm like, it's going to be so cool. Without further ado, I want to introduce everybody to one of my amiguis, Angel Rodriguez. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and your identities, and we'll start there.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about our conversation. Definitely a señora, and I find myself in those spaces in our groups. And so it's really fun to be there. So I am a first Gen Xer. Really proud to be that. Nicaraguan and Mexican American woman. And I think all of those things really pour into who I am. I'm a tia, an auntie to many. I've lost track of how many. Some of, I should count, maybe that would be fun. I have nieces and nephews that are related by blood, and then those that are related by heart. So I would count all of them in my tally. So I'm a dog mom, I'm a wife, and a daughter, and a sister. Gosh, I have so many identities, so many things to play into who I am. I'm a jefa, an entrepreneur, a social worker, and all of those things really make up who I am and how I show up in the world. So that's why.
So not only being the señora, right, but it's like this multifaceted, multiple hats, multiple roles that you're playing in, and not only for yourself, but also in relationship with others. I like things like being like a tia, a wife, a dog mom. Like it is the sense of like we're in relationship with other people. And I've gotten the sense from you that you are a very relational person. And so I'm thinking about your journey to señorahood, right? Can you kind of tell us, like, how did you, because for me, it was turning 40. I was like 40 officially. I claim it. I'm here. What has been your journey to like say like, okay, like I'm in this season of my life as a señora? Was there any experiences or any moments that kind of marked and said like, oh yeah, I know things. I am a little bit older, but in like the best way. I can give wisdom, right? What has been this journey into señorahood for you?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure that it was an age that I reached. I think maybe it was coming into the second career piece for me. And I hit that around 45.
Okay.
And I think I found myself realizing that as I was talking about where I had been, having had 23 years in government service, I would hear myself say that and think, that kind of feels like a lifetime.
That's a little bit of a long time.
It's a bit. And so it's finding myself hearing myself talk about that. And then I think it was more hearing myself talk about it, but it was hearing other people react to what that was and feeling people's respect for that, which was nice. And as I was really building the business and thinking about where do I want to go, what do I want to do, and figuring out how was life treating me and what was 45 and 46 and 47 and 48, all of these ages bringing me. And the answer to that was it was bringing me menopause, which I think I know no one really talks about. Women don't really talk about that. And as your body changes and as things happen to you, you kind of struggle through it and wonder what's happening to me. Is this what's happening to me because I'm not eating right, maybe? Or is it just age? And you go to the doctor and you have these conversations, and sometimes they just kind of brush you off. And I think that's when I started feeling a little bit more and more like I really am entering this senora period. And I think that's kind of when it really sort of hit me. And, you look at I'm still fortunate enough to have my mom, many of my aunts, my tias, my grandmother, who's 91.
Wow.
My mom's mom. So I have so many of my family members. And so when I look at them, on some level, I still feel very young. Right? Because I look ahead and I still see them as the elders.
Yeah.
So I'm fortunate enough to be able to look ahead and see them and have seen them go through so much of life. And I think, wow, there's still so much ahead. But I'm still kind of going through the thick of it.
Yeah. Yeah. They're like on the other side. They've made it.
Yes. And they're still making it. They're still going through things.
Yes.
I don't remember those kinds of conversations happening at the dinner table, on the couch, out when we're shopping, doing things. And those conversations don't happen. And right now, and I don't know if you're seeing it or hearing it, but there's this surge. I wouldn't call it a resurgence. There's this movement around menopause. There's a lot of conversation about it, and I'm really excited about it because women my age, the women I went to high school with, the women I went to college with, we're all having these conversations around what's happening to you. Are these things happening to you? Are these symptoms happening to you? And we're talking about all of these things and saying, okay, it is normal. I'm not going crazy, really. It's an actual thing that's happening and it's okay. So I think that's what's happened in terms of señorahood.
Señorahood. Well, it's interesting, right? Because there is maybe even like in my head, I'm like, what is the emotional part? What is the wisdom part of becoming a señora, right? Like there is this like more like a transformation, but it has this association of just like, is at least my association. It's like, oh, this is good. It's exciting. I feel empowered and autonomous. But there is this part also about how we change and how we're constantly changing, right? And the conversations that we're not having. And I think that's what's remarkable about entering the señora era at this stage, because a lot of the conversations that we're having, that we're seeing online, that you and your peers are having, that me and my peers are having, these conversations, we didn't have access to them for a variety of reasons, right? Like you said, the women in our family, the folks that were going through these experiences that were not, and I don't know, it's like transparent or forthcoming, or maybe they didn't think that it was something that it was interesting or necessary to hear, right? For a variety of reasons. But we are entering this season into life with a lot more knowledge and a lot more access to information. And that changes things, right? So it makes me think about the next question that I kind of had for you. How does your journey, as you're seeing it, right? Because you do have multi-generational, you have a grandma, you have a mom, you have tias, then there's you. And so you are the baby señora in comparison to like all the other women that you have in your life. But there's this multi-generational relationship between all of you. So what is the difference that you see kind of from the journey that you're going into and the journey that you've either seen them go through or that you've heard them talk about in terms of like welcoming the señorahood? Because as a one thing that comes to my mind is like, I don't think that I remember hearing the women that were older than me being excited about getting older. I feel really excited about getting older. My life has gotten significantly better as I get older. So I'm like, this is just starting. This gets better. And this is still a long time, right? So what do you see as a difference, as you not compare for like, oh, what do they have, what I have, but as you see the parallel journeys of their señorahood and the women that you saw growing up versus the journey that you're taking, how is it similar or different?
I think I'm with you on this in terms of excitement. I think that as I've reached new decades, it's exciting for me. I think I feel more confident and I feel like there's something new to discover. And I feel maybe more ready to tackle whatever life is bringing. You know, as I was discovering my journey in social work and learning more things and feeling maybe more solid in how I was able to show up for my clients, myself, maybe the people I supervised at times, it got better, which to me made sense. And then as I transitioned out of that and figured out and am figuring out how to be an entrepreneur and still be there for my clients, be there for myself, it is exciting. And I think that there is still some hesitation around what happens as I get older. That whole, maybe body, mind, spirit, not understanding sometimes how does everything intertwine, play together. Those weren't conversations that happened or that maybe I listened to or understood. Maybe they weren't happening. I don't know. And I'm not sure that there was a lot of excitement for the older generation. I think obviously the people in my family, the women in my family, they want to live a long time. But with that comes the creaks and things that happen in your body that aren't as wonderful, the pains and all of those things.
Los achaques, the heating pad.
Exactly. Vix doesn't take care of everything all the time. And so how are they going to manage all these things in life that their body is bringing to them? And those weren't always conversations that were out in the open. So I think that as I was noticing the women in my family getting older, I was noticing, people are feeling a little more broken down a little bit. And how are they taking care of themselves? And how am I going to do that for myself? And how am I going to make some upgrades around that? And how am I going to share that knowledge with my nieces and my nephews? And how am I going to share? How am I going to bring that to them? Because I feel some responsibility to do that.
Mm.
And I'm more aware of that, I think, now.
The responsibility to tell the story and to tell a story that is accurate, a story that highlights both the exciting parts, the more difficult parts, a story that is ethical, that is considerate of the players that live in the story. So what I'm hearing is a little bit of the difference in how you're approaching the Señora journey is that as you gather information, you're also conscientious of what you're going to do with this information and how you're going to pass it down. So the generation that's coming after doesn't have to fill in as many as the blanks maybe as you've had in the blanks.
Yeah. And I think as a child, maybe as a younger adult, I was a listener. I was gathering information. I was listening to the stories and maybe not asking as many questions as either I could have or should have. And I'm not sure if that was because it was a comfort thing and whether or not I was comfortable in doing that, or if that was what I felt was my place as a young person to just listen and figure out what was happening. Now I feel like I'm a storyteller. And having gathered information and still gathering information in doing all that, I feel like it's my responsibility to tell stories and to gather information and to share that, because without telling stories, then the information stays buried. And how is it that our generations can know what has happened if we don't share that information?
Yeah, I think I've gone through a little bit of a similar realization in this like Señora journey, right? Like you were talking about earlier about 23 years in the field, right? And the way that people look at you. I'm finally getting to this point where I'm talking about like 15 years of being a therapist, 20 years of being a professional, right? And it feels like really strange, but in there is this like part of just like, I know things, and what is my responsibility to share these things that I know. And in fact, a part of the inspiration of starting the podcast was when I was having this cafecito with a friend of mine, and we're going back and forth and we're thinking and we're like thought partnering, just this really cool conversation. And then we both stop and we're like, somebody should have heard that. Right. And then, and then I was like, actually, I have this dream, blah, 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 of having like a platform where I am kind of saving the stories partly for me, right? Because I get to meet so many cool people. I get to think deeply and differently about so much. And a lot of it is a privileged position, right? Of just like having the type of interest that I have and finding people in community that are interested in the same thing. But yeah, there is this responsibility then that I felt about like, what do I do with all these things that I know? Some of the privileged information, like in the classroom, like I teach in grad school, right? How does the average person who is not in a grad school class access this information, these stories, right? That I know to tell from this background that help us think differently about the world. In the therapy room, like in one-on-one, there's so many conversations that stay here. They're private. They're for us, right? And so I was inspired earlier this year to say like, what is my responsibility in terms of storytelling? And so it is really amazing to hear you also kind of that como concientizarse, like being conscientious of like what our responsibility as señoras is becoming, that it's not just for us. Like for a long time, it was about just surviving. And now that we're like, okay, we're thriving, we're very close to thriving, we're thriving in many areas. Can we now give back in different ways, right? And build connections. And I think that's something that you had said before around storytelling. It is a powerful tool for building connections and transcends culture, generation. Can you speak a little bit about that around what is the meaning of storytelling? How is storytelling useful, and how does it connect folks to one another?
Yeah, it is central to building connections. And I think that without sharing who we are, where we've been, we lose out. We lose out on big pieces of our family history, on on so much of that. And like we've talked about before, it really goes beyond culture. I mean, I think in both of our fields, without understanding the history of where our field started and the struggles and everything that the people who've come before us have gone through to get us where we are, we miss out. So I think that that's important. And I think when we share who we are, it humanizes us and it takes away that othering piece. Because it's very easy to other someone when we don't understand who they are, where they've been, what they're about, what they believe, just kind of the basics of who they are. And it's not really, we all have, I think, some protection around us, right, that we keep. And we get to decide who and what we tell to anyone and everyone. And you might share more with someone that you feel a sense of safety with. And you might share less with someone who you've just met because you're kind of trying to gauge, right, how much you want to give. And as you get to know someone, either someone in friendship, someone in the workplace, someone that you might be dating, you start sharing more and more. Because you want to build relationships. We're all meant to live in community. And without that community, we have nothing. It's a very lonely place to live. So I think when we share even the smallest story, it really humanizes who you are. People will remember you. They will identify maybe even the smallest thing about you and connect with you. And I think, it's really important. When I came into the workplace, and especially in the field that I was in child protection, you really couldn't share, especially with your client, who you are. When a client would ask me, especially in anger, well, do you have kids? Answering that question, there were many ways to not answer that question. Because really, at the end of the day, did it matter if I had kids? What they were asking me was, how can you understand the pain
with me? Can you understand my experience? Yeah.
Right. I'm in pain. And how is it that you can understand the pain that I'm in if you don't have kids? The reality is, I don't have kids. And me telling them wasn't going to necessarily help the situation. What I needed to be able to relate was that I was there to support them. I was there to support their kids. And I was there to do my best to help them reunify with their kids. So any kind of question like that was really them kind of testing. So I say all that to go back to that storytelling piece around sharing a piece of myself wasn't something that I was able to do, but I had to find a way to connect and find a way to make sure that the people I was working with could connect with me too. And I found a way to do that each and every time. And with everyone, it was different. And I'm still, as an entrepreneur, I do it in different ways so that the people that are actual clients, the people that are potential clients, figure out that I'm someone that they want to work with, that I can be someone that can support their business, that will be someone that they, that can support their organization, right? And the people in it. Because really, an organization sounds like the outer shell, but really, it's all the people in it that make up that larger outer shell.
The other thing that comes to mind, not only with work, the power of storytelling, the power of telling the stories, but also particularly in Latinx culture, right? I can only speak from my perspective as my own experience as a Latina, that we do in Latinidad, a common thing that brings people together is storytelling, right? Like we gather around kitchens, we gather in salas, we gather in the backyard, in a garage, right? To tell stories, to tell cuentos, consejos, right? And sometimes even when you're a kid, it's just like, ay, va mi mamá con otra. Like, right? Like we dread it sometimes, the storytelling, because it's like, why do I need to know all of that for you to tell me, no, I can't go to this party. No, I can't go hang out with my friend. It's like, why do I need to know that the world is unsafe and every time and that this is why no? Just tell me no, right? The thing is that in our culture, right, like storytelling through this maybe less direct ways of saying no, it is a way to get people to really understand that when I'm telling you no, this is why I'm telling you no. And I hope you understand that there is a reason that I have it. As a kid, it's hard. You just want to go hang out with your friend, right? But it's such at the center of being, in the culture. And then also then I'm thinking about where we started with the Señora journey, that is almost like a rite of passage into señorahood to like get your own like palabritas, consejos, right? I know a friend from Cafecito con Jefas is like, ya vas con tu tía consejo. And I'm just like, I got tía consejos. Like, I can give you some, right? So it's like this, like, telling stories is not just like, this thing that like now because we have degrees or we have jobs or we have businesses, but this is like at the center of culture of how knowledge has been passed down in generations before us.
Right. And I think in thinking about, when you were talking about how, your parents tell you, or you hear a whole story before you can hear yes or no, your parents want to know who you're going with, who you're going to be with. Otherwise, the answer is automatically no. But really what they, I think, wanted to know was, what's that family story? Who are they? Where did they come from? What do they believe? Because I'm sending off my precious daughter or son to spend time with you. And are you safe? So they're not just going to say yes for the sake of saying yes. My grandmother pretty much still does. But when I was a kid, every person on the block, down the block that we lived on, down the other side, and all the way around to the other cul-de-sac. She knew every single person.
Wow.
Because she made it her business too. And it was, I think, a matter of a little bit of safety, but still wanting to understand who are these people? We live together. This is the community. We should all know each other. It's just how it was. And as people have moved out or some of the older, families have died, new people come in, she still wants to know who's the new person that lives over there, and she'll head over there or they'll come and she wants to understand who's living in the neighborhood because it's important.
So storytelling for safety, but also for community building, right? You use storytelling in the work that you do nowadays, right? Because you are One of the things that you mentioned when we first spoke a couple months ago is that you said in the workplace there's three generations right now, right? And so it's making me think about how do we make those connections amongst the generations, because we believe such different things. We approach the work in life so different. It's something about the approach that's very differently, right? Gen Xers supervising the Gen Zers. That's a whole generational gap. We have the millennials in the middle just trying to be like, wise, right? Like, and then so they have the millennials with the Gen Z or millennials with Gen Xers, right? So there's like all this generational I was going to say divide, but generational differences, right? That at times we feel like divides because we're not taking the time to come in and bridge, right? Like our worlds, and much of that through storytelling. So how do you use storytelling in the work that you do to bridge these generations that are finding themselves in the workplace or elsewhere?
It's really important to listen and gather information to then relay that back, which is part of storytelling. And some of the work that I do, I can find a way to use storytelling in all of it. So some of the work that I do with respect to leadership coaching, listening to what leaders are talking about, wanting to gather what are the issues that they're facing, and letting them talk about that, and then relaying it back to them and gathering all of that information back to tell the story back to them and to support them in writing the story about their organization so that they can then go back and talk to their teams about what is happening in their organization and what is it that they want to happen. Is what is happening currently what needs to continue happening? So that's something that's really important. Another thing that's really critical around grant management. So something that'll happen is a nonprofit organization that gets a grant, large grant, small grant, something. They really are focused on doing the work, the everyday work that they do. You know, they get the money that comes in because they need it to continue functioning. They'll bring me in to support them in figuring out how do we keep using this money? How do we report back to the funder? There's storytelling all over it. And it's my responsibility to listen again to everyone in that organization, tell their stories about what is happening there. How is it that they do their work? And how critical is that money to supporting them on their journey? And then putting that all together to either give it back to the organization or give it to the funder and say, look at how what you provided to this organization was empowering, served the community, made such a difference. So it may not be how people think about storytelling, but I use it all the time. And it has served me. It has served me very well. Curriculum writing is another way. You know, you can find small stories to pull into curriculum and share with people that come in and take courses, especially, you know, for social workers. We love a good story. And whether or not I've experienced the actual situation or scenario that I put together, or I get that from the client themselves about what it is that they want to see put forth, I'll bring that and put that together and make sure that it's said in a way that can be heard by the social workers, supervisors, or something like that. and make sure that it's in the curriculum in a way that's going to be meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting to think about what we're not calling storytelling, and yet is literally storytelling, right?
Mhm.
Marketing, showing up on social media, pitching your work, right? Like all of that really at the end of the day is like, how are you telling your story to others? One, to provide the education and create that bridge, right? Because sometimes it's about not knowing, and it's like, oh, I didn't even know that happened. Like I see that on in therapy world all the time. It's like, I didn't even know what therapy was. I didn't understand what it was, right? And it's like we, as therapists, I think we have like a marketing problem because we are trained in like, do not show up, kind of like you shared earlier, like do not give information about you, do not overshare, right? And I think there is this new generation of the next generation of like the millennials, the Gen Zers, who are actually approaching the work so differently because they are bold in sharing about themselves. I still struggle with that. I still hear that do not take a lot of the space because it's not in the best interest of the client, right? Like as I'm recording the podcast, I'm like, what am I sharing about myself? Because like, is a client going to hear it, right? So storytelling actually career-wise has been almost coated with a little bit of anxiety because of my training. And what you're kind of implying and saying is actually you're using storytelling. And if you know your boundaries, if you know what you're consenting to share, the storytelling is a huge bridge in the work. Written storytelling, or even celebrating, right, through storytelling of like, what have we done with this money, with this program, with this product that we put out there? Like we have to be able to tell stories.
Absolutely. If you don't celebrate, then what are we doing this for? Right. And I think, you raise a good point about being in your field in the therapy world. Absolutely. Trying to keep who you are in your life outside of that therapist client relationship. That is really a tricky dance. And you're still who you are on social media, right? And especially as a professional, and you're still putting yourself out there in a way where you want to be genuine and you want to be that humanized brand and people to connect with you because those are your people. Those are the people that you want to say, I like her. I think she's someone that I can work with. But you still have that line. And instead of it being, I think now, this hard line, it's kind of more of a wavy line, right? It's kind of more like, well, there's that intersectionality, right? That's how you started this whole conversation with me. Who are you? What are your identities? Not one of those things, I think, that I said about myself, for me, more important than the other. They're all woven into each other because they all make up who I am. And I can't say that I would put one on top of the other. What's most important is that I'm me. And that's it. So when you put yourself out there, you have to be genuine to who you are and trust that who comes to you, who is drawn to you, are the right people for you. And the same for me. I have to be who I am, be authentic, and let the right people come to me so that we can decide, is working together a good fit?
Storytelling not being only for others to listen to, but also the getting to know the essence of you, and using storytelling as an entrepreneur or as somebody in like a professional role to then bring and to find your community, to find who are going to be, who gathers together, right? Like at that fire or the kitchen or the sala, right? Or in the garage, like all the mental ways that I'm like thinking about how we gather.
Yeah.
It's fascinating that as in the professional world, we're not having this huge emphasis because it is such a vital, central part of being a professional. Is that you have to be able to know what story you're telling. You have to know what story is that you're company, your agency is trying to tell, so then you can be aligned with the storytelling. So it is interesting that we are not, in general, sort of having this training about how to use storytelling for us to serve us, but then also to find the people, you know, and bring them along with you.
Right. And that's why I do that. And I do workshops around storytelling to support people in doing a little bit of that and figuring out what parts of my story am I willing to share so that I'm comfortable and I feel like this is a part of me that is okay to put out there. And know that if someone else knows this, it's okay because it's part of who I am. It's part of who I am as a person, as a professional, and I can share it.
And similarly to you, you said it's like all the things that I shared about me, I've gotten to the point where it's just like, no, I need you to know that I'm queer. I need you to know that I'm an immigrant. I need you, because there is a way that I'm going to show up that inevitably is informed by all these things. And if you don't know, and you come in and you walk in and you're a person that it really matters, right? I think some people are like, oh, you're just another therapist. I'm just going to see anybody. But I'm having the experience that the people that are coming to want to work with me are people that genuinely want to have this connection or like this bridge, right? And so what I always tell people is like, yeah, I'm Latina, I'm queer, and you're Latina and you're queer, and like you're married, I'm married, you're a dog mom, I'm a dog mom. But I want to know what kind of dogs you have and what kind of food do you give your dogs, right? Like what kind of, if you're a plant mom, what kind of plants you have? I can tell you about plants. And so the storytelling for me, what it's doing is finding like a piece of conversation that differentiates us, but that also finds commonality. And it's almost like this in and out of knowing one another. And it's so powerful. And it is really fascinating to think that we're not having this emphasis, particularly as we have this generational gaps, right? In the workplace, career-wise, because storytelling could be, with intention, the most powerful tool to like bridge some of this these gaps that may exist.
Oh yeah. I mean, the power that's in the story is on. Yeah.
So what would you say to people that are maybe a little bit more shy or a little bit, maybe one that they should come to your workshop? So next time that you have storytelling, y'all, like we're going to put it in the shit book. How do you follow Angel? Please stay in touch with them so that you can come to the workshop. But just like a snippet of like a preview, what are some of the things that folks who are maybe listening to this episode, they're like, oh yeah, like I'm storytelling all the time and I maybe need to be more intentional about how I storytell. Where should we begin with this deconstruction of like what storytelling, the power of storytelling for all of us in the professional world, but also in our personal lives?
You know, I think it's about getting clear for yourself about who you are. And when you think about what is it that you so willingly share with others and what is it that you hold back, and understanding the whys behind that. You know, we share, for those of us that have social media, we share so much all the time. Or do we? Because the people have a lot of social media that are scrollers, right? They don't share, they consume. And what is it about consuming that is so important to you without creating? So what is it that you are putting, what are you putting behind that wall? And what's so important to you about engaging in that way without actually engaging? So think about, what are your relationships like with people? Who are your friends? Are you in a relationship? How do you speak to each other? All of those kinds of things. Where are your stories held? Do you journal? All those kinds of things are important. What kinds of shows do you watch on TV? Do you watch shows? What's important to you about that? Where do you notice stories? Do you read? What kinds of books do you read? I mean, you can tell behind me, I enjoy reading. And sometimes it's something I read for the story. Sometimes I read for learning purposes. it's important to me to stay up on, the research and all that kind of stuff for the work that I do. But I think it's important to really consider stories in our lives and the stories we tell ourselves about what's happening and how do we engage with other people. So that's a little bit of what I make sure that I talk about with people around storytelling.
I love that. So as we kind of come to the end of our interview, the way that the question sounds in my head is like, what is the story, or what is the story sound like for Angel, the story that is driving this next leg of the journey, right? Because you've had some transitions, you exited out of your role as just a social worker, and you've expanded from the social work into like all these other realms that are related, but also exciting in very different ways. So what is the story? What is the narrative that you're holding about yourself, about your life, about your career, about the future, that is kind of the North Star guiding you to going?
That's a really good question. I think the sky's the limit as I approach the next decade of my life. And I'm looking to really reach as many clients as will have me, quite honestly. I'm really, as an expert social worker and innovator, I really want to support organizations that are seeking transformation. If you are looking to transform what you are doing in your organization, I want to support you in doing it. And I believe that that's what I can do. And so that's what I'm looking to do professionally. And personally, I am looking to travel the world with my wife, as many places as we can go. I think that it's hard to say a balance because, I think balance is a tricky word to use when you think about personal and professional. I think people talk about this work-life balance, and I think it's important to be honest with yourself about what it is that you're doing, and whether or not you are really taking time out for yourself, and whether, as an entrepreneur, as someone who maybe is in a very high-ranking position in an organization or something, you always have, at least I find, you have your work at the top of your mind so often, right? It's really hard to shut off. So I think finding time to really get into a hobby or do something you love, go a place that you like to go to, have dinner with friends, like do that kind of stuff, be in your community. Those are the things that I like to do. And it's not always so black and white and cut and dry. So I want to make sure that I do that as much as possible and be 100% into the work that I do and be 100% into things that I like to do, my personal life and fun time, as much as I possibly can. So
I love that. When I heard you talk, the word that came into my mind was like, can our life, our professional life and our personal life be in harmony rather than balance? Like something about like the music melody of multiple instruments, but that somehow like go together. Like that's the image coming to me as I've heard you, right? It's just like,
I think harmony is excellent.
Harmony.
Yeah, I love that. I like that. I think I might use that.
This is a beautiful part of storytelling, co-creating, right? Like
exactly.
And thought partnering. And this is why I love this opportunity. And thank you so much for letting me into your world and sharing yourself with us, and this is the goal of Entre Tías y Amiguis, right? That some of us may not have, like you, the luck to have our moms, our grandmas, and to have this multi-generational part, but we can find community and fulfill those needs through other avenues. And I'm so thankful. And we will put all the links of how to get in touch with Angel and attend one of the storytelling workshops. I know it's on my to-do list for when it comes next. So very excited. And maybe some of the audience and folks that listen will join us too.
That would be awesome. I would love that. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Of course. Thank you for your time. And so until next time, y'all, this is Entre Tías y Amiguis, conversations about the wild roller coaster life of adulting. Thank you, Angel.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your tías and amiguis. Your support helps us reach more people and continue these important conversations. And don't forget to follow us on social media and stay connected. Until next time, remember to take care of yourself, embrace your journey, and keep living life with heart, vision, and creativity.